I'm Sarah, 27 years old, and my world turned upside down when I purchased a rundown cabin for $2,800 in the mountains of North Carolina. My sister Emma needed $4,500 for her dream art residency program in Vermont, and my parents expected me to contribute $2,500. When I revealed my cabin purchase instead, my mother's face twisted with fury. "You're dead to us," she shrieked while my father and sister watched in silent approval. That moment crystallized years of being the forgotten daughter, while my artistic sister received endless support. If you've ever chosen your dreams over family guilt, drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button to follow my journey. Growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina, our upper-middle-class lifestyle was never equally distributed between Emma and me. Our parents, Robert and Linda Chen, both worked professional jobs, Dad as an engineer at a tech company and Mom as a marketing director for a healthcare firm. They provided comfortable lives, but comfort came with invisible strings, especially attached to me. Emma, 2 years older, was always the creative soul of our family. Her paintings adorned every wall of our house, her poetry readings were mandatory family events, and her dramatic performances in high school were attended by our parents with the enthusiasm of Broadway critics. Meanwhile, my achievements in mathematics and eventual accounting degree were met with polite nods and comments about being practical and level-headed. The pattern established itself early. When Emma needed expensive art supplies for her senior portfolio, our parents didn't hesitate to spend $800 on professional-grade materials. When I needed a graphing calculator for AP statistics, they suggested I ask around to borrow one from classmates. Emma's acceptance to art school was celebrated with a family dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town. My acceptance to UNC, with a partial academic scholarship warranted takeout pizza and a pat on the back. Emma is more sensitive, Mom would explain whenever I questioned the disparity. She needs more encouragement to flourish in her artistic journey. I was labeled the independent one, or the responsible one. Code words meaning the daughter who shouldn't expect much attention or support because she could handle things on her own. This dynamic continued through college. Emma attended a prestigious private art school where tuition alone cost $45,000 annually. Our parents covered her full tuition, room and board, art supplies, and even a monthly allowance for creative experiences like gallery visits and artist workshops. Meanwhile, I worked my way through state school, pulling double shifts at a campus bookstore and weekend shifts at a local restaurant. Despite my scholarship, I graduated with $28,000 in student loans. After graduation, Emma's journey resembled a pinball machine, bouncing between artistic pursuits with impressive-sounding names but little practical application. First came her ceramics phase, which required a $3,000 kiln and studio rental. Then her photography period, necessitating professional camera equipment costing $5,500. Next was her jewelry-making venture, which demanded precious metals and gemstones that mysteriously never translated into profitable sales. Each artistic pivot came with financial crises that became family emergencies requiring immediate solutions. Emma's exploring her creative voice, Dad would say, when I questioned these bailouts. Artists need time to find their medium. My own journey involved working 55-hour weeks at a mid-sized accounting firm while freelancing tax preparation during busy season to pay off my student loans ahead of schedule. By age 27, I had finally achieved financial independence. My student loans were paid off, and I had saved $23,000, no small accomplishment in today's economy. I lived in a modest apartment with my roommate Katie, who had recently announced her engagement and planned to move in with her fiancé. This meant my rent would either double or I'd need to find another roommate, neither option appealing as Charlotte's rental market had become increasingly expensive. One evening, while browsing real estate listings more from curiosity than serious intent, I discovered something that seemed too good to be true. A 750-square-foot cabin listed for $2,800 in a small mountain town called Pine Ridge, about 3 hours from Charlotte. The listing photos showed a clearly deteriorated structure with a partially collapsed deck and boarded windows, explaining the remarkably low price. The property was being sold through an estate auction after the previous owner had passed away intestate, and distant relatives wanted to liquidate quickly. "This has to be a scam," Katie said, looking over my shoulder at my laptop screen. "That's less than some people spend on rent." Intrigued despite my skepticism, I contacted the estate attorney handling the sale. To my amazement, I received a detailed response confirming the listing's legitimacy. The attorney explained that rural mountain properties often sold for surprisingly low amounts when they required extensive renovation and were located far from major cities. This particular cabin had been vacant for 3 years, had no functioning utilities, and would need substantial work to be habitable. Most buyers would have been discouraged. I saw opportunity. My accounting mind immediately began calculating potential costs versus value. Even investing $18,000 in renovations would give me a mortgage-free home for under $21,000 total, less than a down payment on most Charlotte properties. That weekend, I drove to Pine Ridge to inspect the property in person. The listing photos hadn't exaggerated the cabin's condition, but standing in the overgrown clearing, I felt something I hadn't experienced before, a sense of possibility that was entirely my own. The cabin sat on 2 acres of wooded land at the end of a gravel road. Behind the property, the Appalachian Mountains stretched toward the horizon, and a small stream ran along the eastern boundary. The structure itself was basic but solid, log construction with a stone foundation that appeared intact despite years of neglect. Walking through the interior required careful navigation around damaged floorboards and fallen ceiling tiles. The single large room served as living area and kitchen, with a sleeping loft accessible by a ladder and a small bathroom that hadn't functioned in years. Windows were broken or boarded up, and wildlife had clearly taken up residence in various corners. But underneath the decay, I could see the cabin's potential. The log walls were structurally sound, the stone fireplace needed cleaning but was intact, and the loft space could be transformed into a cozy bedroom with proper windows and insulation. Pine Ridge itself was small but not isolated. The town boasted a general store, a diner, a post office, and surprisingly good internet service thanks to a recent rural broadband initiative. Several residents had mentioned the area's growing popularity with remote workers and retirees seeking mountain living at affordable prices. The auction process was straightforward. After inspecting the property thoroughly and confirming there were no liens or legal complications, I submitted my bid of $2,800, the minimum required amount. When the auction closed, I was the sole bidder. Just like that, I own my first home. My friends' reactions ranged from bewildered to supportive. My co-workers couldn't understand why I'd want to live in the middle of nowhere in a house that probably has bears in the yard. But I had a vision that others couldn't grasp, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone else's approval to pursue it. My renovation plan was methodical and budget-conscious. First priority was making the structure weatherproof, replacing the roof, repairing windows, and sealing the exterior walls. Next came essential systems, electricity, plumbing, and heating. Finally, I'd tackle cosmetic improvements like flooring, paint, and fixtures. I created detailed spreadsheets projecting costs. Roof repair using metal roofing, $3,200 for materials with me providing labor. Window replacement, $1,800 for energy-efficient units. Electrical system overhaul, $2,500 requiring professional installation. Plumbing restoration, $2,200 including new bathroom fixtures. Heating system, $1,600 for a wood stove and propane backup. Insulation and interior walls, $2,400. Flooring throughout, $1,800. Kitchen appliances and fixtures, $1,500. Miscellaneous supplies and contingency, $2,000. Total projected cost, $19,000. Combined with the purchase price, I'd have a fully renovated mountain home for $21,800, less than most people's car loans. The timeline was ambitious but achievable. Working weekends and vacation days, I estimated 8 months to completion. My plan involved maintaining my Charlotte job during the week while dedicating weekends to renovation work. I'd camp on the property during good weather or sleep in my car when necessary. Each weekend brought me closer to my goal of financial freedom and a lifestyle aligned with my values rather than others' expectations. I researched Pine Ridge's economic prospects and found encouraging trends. Property values had appreciated steadily as more people discovered the area's appeal. The town was planning infrastructure improvements, and several new businesses had opened recently. My investment appeared sound from both personal and financial perspectives. What I hadn't anticipated was how my family would react when my cabin purchase interfered with their assumption that I'd once again fund Emma's latest artistic endeavor. The family dinner that changed everything occurred on a Sunday in early May. Mom had prepared her famous lasagna, Emma's favorite, and Dad had opened an expensive bottle of wine. I should have recognized the signs of an incoming financial request: special food, good wine, and everyone being unusually pleasant. Emma looked different from our last encounter at Christmas. Her previously purple-streaked hair was now natural brown, styled in what she called a more authentic artistic expression. She wore flowing clothes in earth tones and minimal makeup, part of what she described as embracing raw creativity. "I've been having these terrible creative blocks," Emma announced as Mom served dinner. "My art professor says it's common for artists transitioning between growth phases, but my therapist thinks I'm experiencing environmental overstimulation that's blocking my creative channels." Dad nodded seriously while Mom made sympathetic sounds. I focused on my food, having heard variations of this conversation countless times. Every few months, Emma discovered new obstacles to her artistic development that required expensive solutions not covered by regular health insurance. "What does your therapist recommend?" Mom asked with genuine concern. Emma's face brightened. "She told me about this incredible artistic residency program in Vermont called Mountain Vista Creative Sanctuary. It's specifically designed for artists experiencing creative transitions. They provide private studios, daily meditation sessions, organic meals, and individualized mentoring from established artists." "That sounds wonderful," Dad commented, refilling Emma's wine glass, which seemed counterproductive to creative clarity, though I kept that observation to myself. "It really is life-changing," Emma continued. "My friend Sophia from art school attended last summer and came back completely transformed. Her work improved dramatically, and she's now represented by a gallery in Boston making six-figure sales." I suppressed an eye roll. Emma always seemed to know people who achieved miraculous results from whatever program she was currently interested in, yet these same programs never seemed to yield similar outcomes for her. "How long is this residency?" I asked, genuinely curious about what would justify the inevitably steep price. 6 weeks of intensive creative immersion," Emma replied with a hint of defensiveness. "The artist mentors are internationally recognized. The facility is located on 200 acres of pristine Vermont countryside. They limit participation to only 8 artists to ensure personalized attention." "Sounds exclusive," I remarked neutrally. "It is," Emma confirmed. "That's why it's such an amazing opportunity. They had a last-minute withdrawal, and I can claim the spot if I can secure funding within 2 weeks." There it was, the evening's true purpose. "How much does something like that cost?" Dad asked, though I suspected he already knew the answer. Emma took a deep breath. "The program fee is $4,500 for 6 weeks. That includes studio space, accommodation, all meals, and intensive mentoring sessions." I nearly choked on my wine. That amount exceeded my entire cabin purchase and several months of renovation materials combined. "But it's an investment in my artistic future," Emma quickly added. "Sophia says the connections alone are worth the price. Some participants have launched major careers directly from relationships formed during the residency." "And you want to become what exactly?" I asked, remembering her previous enthusiasms for pottery, photography, and jewelry making. "I've been gravitating toward mixed media installation art," Emma said with slight irritation. "My previous explorations were all leading toward this ultimate expression. The residency would help me synthesize everything into a cohesive artistic voice." Mom and Dad exchanged their familiar silent communication look. "We think this could be really beneficial for you," Mom said. "Both for your artistic development and your career direction." "We'd like to help," Dad added, but $4,500 is substantial on short notice. We can contribute $2,000 toward the program." Emma's face fell momentarily before she recovered. "That's incredibly generous. Thank you both so much." Then all three pairs of eyes turned toward me. The silence stretched uncomfortably as I realized what was happening again. "Sarah," Emma finally said, adopting the gentle tone she used when attempting persuasion, "I know you're always so responsible with money and great at saving. I was hoping you might consider helping with the remaining $2,500. The amount was close to my cabin's purchase price, making the request feel almost personal. "I don't have that kind of money available right now," I said carefully, not ready to reveal my recent purchase. "But you're always saving," Mom pointed out. "Surely you have something set aside for opportunities like this." "This isn't exactly my opportunity," I replied. "It's Emma's voluntary artistic program." "It's for her career development," Dad countered, his tone suggesting I was being deliberately obtuse. "And her creative growth. This could be the experience that finally establishes her as a serious artist." Emma reached across the table to touch my hand. "I know it's a significant amount, but I'd pay you back once my art career takes off. Think of it as investing in family success." I withdrew my hand, uncomfortable with the emotional manipulation. "I need time to consider it," I said, knowing my answer would ultimately be no. The remainder of dinner passed with underlying tension. Emma spoke extensively about the residency's amenities: private artist studios with north-facing windows, organic vegetarian meals, daily yoga and meditation sessions, and weekend gallery trips to Burlington and Montreal. Each detail reinforced my certainty that this was another expensive experiment unlikely to produce lasting change. Driving home that evening, I felt the familiar battle between guilt and resentment. Guilt whispered that I was selfish for not supporting my sister's dreams. Resentment reminded me that I'd spent my entire life watching my achievements be minimized while Emma's desires were prioritized. But beneath both emotions lay a deeper resolve. My cabin represented my chance to build something permanent and meaningful. I wouldn't sacrifice that opportunity for another of Emma's temporary enthusiasms. The following Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house with a folder containing photos of my new property and detailed renovation plans. I'd spent the week researching local contractors, obtaining building permits, and creating a comprehensive timeline for the work. I was excited to share my project, hoping my family might finally recognize that I was building something substantial. Mom had prepared my favorite meal, grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, which momentarily raised my spirits. Perhaps they'd sensed my hesitation about Emma's residency and wanted to show appreciation for my usual compliance. "Before we eat," I said when everyone was seated, "I have some exciting news to share." "We have news too," Emma interrupted, practically bouncing with excitement. "But you go first." I opened my folder and placed the first photograph on the table, a shot of my cabin with me standing proudly on what remained of the front deck. "I bought a house," I announced, unable to suppress my smile. "It needs extensive renovation, but it's mine. Completely paid for." Silence greeted my announcement. Mom picked up the photo, frowning as she examined it. "This isn't a house," she said finally. "It's a hunting shack." "It's a 750-square-foot cabin," I corrected. "Small, yes, but it's legally classified as a single-family residence. It has a main living area, sleeping loft, kitchen space, and bathroom." "Where is this place?" Dad asked, taking the photo for Mom. "Pine Ridge, in the North Carolina mountains. About 3 hours from Charlotte. It's rural but has essential services, and property values are appreciating as more remote workers move to the area." 3 hours away? Mom looked horrified. "Why would you want to live so far from civilization?" "It's not uncivilized," I said defensively. "It's just quiet and affordable. And I'm not moving there immediately. I'll be renovating on weekends while maintaining my Charlotte job." "How much did you pay for this project?" Dad asked, his tone suggesting he suspected I'd been cheated. $2,800, I said, watching their reactions carefully. Emma gasped. "That's impossible." "Not for rural properties requiring significant renovation," I explained. It was sold through an estate auction after being vacant for 3 years. I'll need to invest about $19,000 in renovations, but even then, I'll own a home outright for under $22,000. Instead of congratulations, my parents exchanged concerned glances. Sarah, Mom said in her patronizing voice, have you had this property properly inspected? It could be a complete money pit. There might be structural damage, foundation problems, or environmental hazards. I've done my research, I interrupted, pulling out the professional inspection report I'd commissioned. Yes, it needs work, but nothing that can't be addressed with proper planning. The foundation is solid, and the log structure is intact. But why would you want to live in isolation? Emma asked, wrinkling her nose. There can't be any cultural activities or art galleries. Not everyone values the same things you do, I replied, trying to control my irritation. I want space, peace, and financial independence. Speaking of financial matters, Dad interjected, have you reconsidered helping Emma with the residency? And there it was, the real reason for their lukewarm response to my news. My cabin purchase directly conflicted with their expectation that I would fund Emma's artistic retreat. Actually, I said carefully, the timing of my house purchase means I don't have extra funds available. All my remaining savings are allocated for essential renovations. You spent your money on that shack instead of helping your sister. Mom's voice had risen noticeably. I invested my money in my future, I corrected. The cabin will appreciate in value as I improve it. Emma's residency is an investment in her future, Dad countered. And her artistic development. Yes, Emma jumped in. And I'd pay you back once my installation art career takes off after the residency. I took a deep breath. Emma, how many artistic pursuits have you tried in the last few years? And how many times have Mom and Dad, or I, helped fund those ventures? Has any of that investment shown tangible returns? Emma's face flushed. That's not fair. I've been developing my artistic voice. At everyone else's expense, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Sarah? Mom snapped. Apologize to your sister immediately. For what? Stating facts? I've worked incredibly hard for every dollar I've saved. I paid my own way through college, worked multiple jobs to pay off student loans early, and I've never asked any of you for financial help. Meanwhile, Emma has received tens of thousands of dollars from this family with no accountability. We support each other in this family, Dad said sternly. That's what families do. No, I countered. You support Emma. I support myself. And apparently, I'm expected to support Emma too. You're being incredibly selfish, Mom declared. Your sister has a genuine opportunity here, and you're choosing to waste money on some fantasy of mountain living. My cabin isn't a fantasy, I said, gathering my photos and documents. It's a tangible asset that will provide financial security. Emma's residency is a $4,500 vacation disguised as career development. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I can't believe you think so little of my art. Just like pottery was going to be your calling. Or photography. Or jewelry making. That's enough. Mom slammed her hand on the table. I won't have you destroying your sister's confidence. What about my confidence? I demanded, no longer willing to back down. When have any of you ever believed in my dreams? Why is her artistic residency more valid than my goal of homeownership? Because her residency is a legitimate opportunity, Dad said. Your cabin project is just you running away from family responsibilities. Responsibilities? I laughed bitterly. I'm the most responsible person in this room. I'm the only one who lives within her means and plans for the future. How is that running away from responsibility? Your responsibility to your family, Mom clarified, which you're clearly abandoning for this selfish project. It's not selfish to invest in myself, I said quietly. I've spent my entire life watching you prioritize Emma's wants over my needs. For once, I'm choosing myself. Well, if that broken-down shack is more important to you than your sister's future, Mom said, her voice escalating, then maybe you should just go live there permanently. In fact, if you walk out that door without agreeing to help Emma, you can consider yourself no longer welcome in this family. Linda, Dad began, looking uncomfortable with the ultimatum. No, Robert. Mom cut him off. I'm tired of her selfish attitude. After everything we've done for her. What exactly have you done for me? I interrupted, years of suppressed resentment suddenly boiling over. When have you ever put my needs first? When have you ever celebrated my achievements the way you celebrate Emma's smallest efforts? We've always treated you girls equally, Dad protested weakly. That's a lie, and you know it, I said, standing up. Emma has always been the favored child, and I've always been an afterthought. The only thing you've ever valued about me is my willingness to solve everyone else's problems, especially financial ones. How dare you speak to us this way? Mom also stood. After all we've sacrificed for you. Name one sacrifice you've made specifically for me, I challenged. Just one. The silence that followed was deafening. That's what I thought, I said, gathering my purse and folder. I'm leaving before we say things that can't be taken back. If you leave now without agreeing to help your sister, Mom said, her voice trembling with rage, then you're dead to us. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd expected anger, disappointment, even guilt trips, but not complete rejection. Mom, Emma gasped, apparently shocked by the severity of the threat. I looked at my father, hoping he might intervene, but he stared at his plate. His silence was as damning as my mother's words. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said finally, surprised by the steadiness of my voice despite tears threatening to fall. But I won't sacrifice my future for Emma's temporary interests anymore. As I walked toward the door, Emma called after me. Sarah, please. You're overreacting. We can work this out. I turned back one last time. There's nothing to work out, Emma. Mom just disowned me because I won't give you $2,500, almost exactly what I paid for my cabin. If you can't see how dysfunctional that is, then we have nothing more to discuss. I walked out and got into my car. Only when I was several blocks away did I pull over and let the tears come. I cried for the family I'd thought I had, for the approval I'd never receive, for the conditional love that had always depended on my compliance. Then I dried my eyes, started the car, and drove not back to my apartment, but straight to Pine Ridge, to my cabin, to the future I was building regardless of my family's blessing. The morning after my confrontation with my family, I woke up in my sleeping bag on the cabin floor. I'd driven through the night, fueled by adrenaline and determination. Arriving in Pine Ridge after midnight, I'd set up camp inside my cabin by flashlight. Waking up stiff and emotionally drained, I looked around at the water-stained walls and broken windows. Doubt crept in. Had I made a terrible mistake? Was I truly throwing away my family for a building that couldn't even keep out the weather? My phone had died during the night, which felt oddly symbolic. I was completely alone with my decision. As I sat on my front steps eating a granola bar for my emergency supplies, a pickup truck pulled into my driveway. An older man in work clothes got out, approaching with friendly curiosity. Morning, he called. You must be the new owner. I nodded, suddenly aware of my rumpled appearance and emotional state. Sarah Chun, I said, walking over to shake his hand. Bill Morrison, he replied. I live about half a mile up the road. Saw your car here early and wanted to check if everything was okay. Just spending some time at my new property, I said, trying to sound like someone who had her life together. Bill glanced at the cabin, then back at me. Big plans for the old Henderson place, I imagine? Henderson, I asked. Jack Henderson owned this cabin for about 30 years before he passed. Good man. Kept the place nice until his health failed. Bill studied the cabin with nostalgia. Shame to see it deteriorate these past few years. Learning that the cabin had once been someone's cherished home made me stand straighter. I'm going to restore it, I said with more confidence than I felt. It'll take time, but I'll bring it back. Bill nodded approvingly. Good to hear. Need any help today? I've got tools in the truck. That simple offer from a stranger broke through my remaining composure. To my embarrassment, I started crying again. Rather than being uncomfortable, Bill just waited patiently while I composed myself. Sorry, I finally managed. It's been a difficult night. Life's full of those, he said simply. Offer still stands. That day, They'll help me clear the overgrown yard enough to see the cabin's full exterior. He brought his chainsaw to remove a fallen tree that was threatening the roof, and together we hauled years of accumulated debris from the interior. As we worked, Bill introduced me to other neighbors who stopped by after hearing about the city girl fixing up the Henderson place. By afternoon, I'd met Martha, who ran the general store and offered me a newcomer discount, and Carlos, who worked construction in Asheville and volunteered to assess my electrical system the following weekend. Pine Ridge is small, but folks look out for each other, Bill explained as we took a break on the front steps, drinking sweet tea that Martha had brought over. Most of us have lived here our whole lives. It's different from Charlotte, I'm sure. In my apartment building, I barely know my neighbors' names, I admitted. That's no way to live, Bill shook his head. People need community. That word, community, resonated deeply. I'd always thought of family as my only meaningful community. Now that connection was severed, yet here I was surrounded by strangers willing to help simply because I was now part of their community. Over the following weekends, I established a renovation routine. Drive to Pine Ridge Friday evening, camp in my sleeping bag inside the cabin, and work from sunrise to sunset Saturday and Sunday before returning to Charlotte. My first major project was making the structure weatherproof. Carlos and his teenage son Miguel taught me how to identify and replace damaged roof boards, install proper underlayment, and lay metal roofing. I worked alongside them, learning through hands-on experience, my office soft hands quickly developing calluses. You're a quick learner, Miguel told me after I successfully completed a section of roof on my own. Most people would hire this kind of work out. I can't afford to hire everything out, I replied. Plus, I want to understand how my house works. The physical labor was therapeutic. Each nail I hammered seemed to drive out some of the pain from my family's rejection. Each rotted board I replaced felt like removing toxic elements from my past. At night, exhausted from hard work, I slept deeply despite the uncomfortable sleeping arrangements. I was too tired to dwell on the missed calls and increasingly desperate text messages that had initially flooded my phone from Emma, though notably not from my parents. My Charlotte friends, concerned about my weekend disappearances and emotional state, eventually insisted on visiting. Katie and her fiancé Marcus drove up one Saturday, bringing lunch and extra hands. Okay, I understand now, Katie said after touring the property and meeting some of my neighbors. This place has incredible potential, and the progress you've made is amazing. She was right. In just a few weekends, the transformation was becoming visible. The roof was solid, the exterior walls were sealed, and I'd started replacing broken windows with energy-efficient units that Carlos had helped me source at contractor prices. How are things with your family? Marcus asked as we ate sandwiches on the newly stabilized front deck. I looked out at the mountains surrounding my little valley. Complete silence from my parents. Emma keeps texting, alternating between guilt and anger. Did she go to her residency? Katie asked. Yes. My parents paid for the entire thing. I try to keep bitterness from my voice. She's been posting Instagram stories of her artistic awakening, with captions about authentic living and releasing toxic relationships. Wow, Marcus said. That's rich. Hypocritical and on-brand, Katie agreed. But look what you've accomplished while she was getting overpriced art therapy. You're building something real. She was right. While Emma had been finding herself at Mountain Vista Creative Sanctuary, I'd been discovering my own strength in Pine Ridge. I'd learned carpentry, basic electrical work, and plumbing. I'd started sketching plans for the kitchen renovation and researching energy-efficient heating systems. More importantly, I'd begun building genuine connections with the Pine Ridge community. I'd attended a town council meeting where residents had welcomed me warmly. I'd volunteered for a community cleanup day at the local park. I'd even adopted a stray dog that had been hanging around my property, naming him Henderson in honor of the cabin's original owner. As summer progressed, I noticed profound changes within myself. The initial hurt from my family's rejection was still present, but it no longer dominated my thoughts. Instead, I found myself focused on the future, planning improvements, imagining furniture arrangements, considering where to plant a vegetable garden. One evening, as I sat on my deck watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, I realized I hadn't checked Emma's social media in weeks. I hadn't anxiously reviewed my text messages hoping for an apology from my parents. I hadn't felt that familiar twist of guilt when thinking about setting boundaries. Instead, I felt peace. Not just pride in the physical progress of the cabin, but genuine satisfaction with my personal growth. For the first time in my life, I was living entirely according to my own values, measuring my worth by my own standards rather than my family's approval. My cabin was still far from finished, but I was becoming complete in ways I'd never experienced before. 4 months after our confrontation, Emma texted me unexpectedly. "Mom and Dad want to talk. Family dinner this Sunday. Please come. We all miss you." I stared at the message for a long time, conflicted emotions swirling through me. Part of me yearned to repair the relationships. Another part feared falling back into old patterns. After consulting with Katie, who reminded me I could leave if things went poorly, I cautiously agreed. Sunday evening found me parked outside my childhood home, gripping the steering wheel and giving myself a pep talk. "You're stronger now. You have boundaries. You have a life you're building on your own terms." The moment I walked through the door, familiar smells and sounds created a powerful wave of nostalgia. For a brief moment, it felt like nothing had changed. Then I saw Emma and reality snapped back into focus. She looked dramatically different from 4 months ago. Her hair was now silver with blue streaks, and she wore flowing black clothing with an array of crystal jewelry. Her arms opened wide as she rushed toward me. "Sarah, I'm so glad you came." She enveloped me in a hug that smelled of patchouli and something herbal. "We have so much to discuss." Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression was carefully neutral, a mixture of awkwardness and what might have been regret. "Sarah," she said stiffly, "you look well." "Mountain living agrees with me," I replied equally formally. Dad entered from the living room, nodding in acknowledgement. "Good to see you," he said, which was more than I'd expected. Dinner was surreal. We sat at the same table where our explosive confrontation had occurred, now carefully navigating safe conversation topics like weather, a neighbor's new baby, and rising gas prices. No one mentioned my cabin. No one referenced Mom's dead to US declaration. Finally, as Mom served dessert, my favorite chocolate cake, clearly a peace offering, Emma could no longer contain herself. "I have to tell you about the residency," she burst out. "Sarah, it was absolutely transformative. I connected with my authentic artistic voice in ways I never imagined possible." "That's wonderful," I said neutrally, taking a small bite of cake. "The facilitators helped me process so many limiting beliefs and generational traumas. We did breath work, sound healing, crystal meditation, and Emma straightened, her crystal necklaces jangling. "I'm launching my own mixed media installation art practice, Transcendent Visions by Emma Chin. I'll be creating large-scale installations, offering art therapy workshops, and eventually hosting my own creative retreats." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "Have you completed any installations yet?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Emma's face. "I'm in the development phase right now, conceptualizing my artistic vision, sourcing materials, building my brand presence. I'm working with a business mentor who specializes in artistic entrepreneurs." "That sounds expensive," I observed before I could stop myself. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "It's an investment in her future," Dad said, echoing his earlier defense. "Just like your cabin project," Mom added, attempting diplomacy. "Speaking of which," Emma said brightly, clearly trying to change subjects, "how is that going? Have you finished the renovations?" There was something condescending in her tone, as if she expected me to have abandoned the project by now. Instead of being offended, I felt a surge of pride. "It's going wonderfully," I replied, pulling out my phone to show updated photos. "The structure is completely restored. I've installed new windows, updated the electrical system, and renovated the bathroom. I'm finishing the kitchen renovation next month."